you are focusing on Pakistani grooming gangs because probably you're racist and you don't believe that there are white perpetrators of the same crime. Can you deny that?
I know the virtue signalling do-gooders want to sort of feel good about themselves, but if you really want to, go and live next to these people. Go and spend your life, and you have them ogling at your children in school.
Breaking right now, Rupert Lowe has shamed Emily Maitlis during an extraordinary appearance on the newsagents where the liberal lefty lovey dismissing the Pakistani Muslim rape gang cover-up, which Alison Pearson has described as the biggest scandal in British history, decided to grasp for what all lefty lovies do, of course, racism. So we're going to pick apart this appearance with Connor Tomlinson of Tomlinson Talks and Courage Media in just one moment. But let's look at this first clash between the pair.
Why are you doing this? Why are you just trying to talk about Pakistani grooming gangs when there are 4 times, 8 times and 10 times as many white grooming gang suspects?
Do you not think, Emily, there's an issue with Pakistani Muslims raping working-class white underage girls? Do you not think there's an issue there?
I think there is an appalling issue with grooming when it hits any community and any age. We only ever hear you talk about Pakistani perpetrators.
Are you telling me there's no issue?
I'm telling you that you are focusing on Pakistani grooming gangs because probably you're racist and you don't believe that there are white perpetrators of the same crime. Can you deny that?
I am concentrating on it because it's a blot on our national history.
Isn't any grooming a blot on our history? It has not been
properly dealt with.
Now, I was quite surprised yesterday when I had Rupert here because he didn't respond at all to that racism allegation. Here's what he told me. Did you hear her accuse you of being racist, and do you want to respond now? Because to me, it's an absolutely egregious allegation.
I hope they published the whole interview because Emily Maitlis, as you know, I think I told her she was a fully paid up member of the British liberal elite, and as you know, she's very good at getting her side of the story across. I'm not a racist. I think everybody knows that, and at the end of the day, Emily is welcome to her own opinions, but she was trying to, as she does, create an interview which everybody wanted to watch. Well, I think I gave her as good as I got, and at the end I shook her hand and we parted. No, I'm not a racist, and she's not going to be able to do to the Duke of York what she did to me, or do to him what do to me what she did to him.
So, Connor Tomlinson, in some ways, I like the fact, right, that Rupert Lowe didn't care. He just didn't care. It's like, I guess these days we're all so used to being called racist, but it's quite shocking, isn't it, that Emily Maitlis had the front to do that. I know you've been looking very closely into this interview. Do you want to respond to that first section?
Yes, well, Dan, our enemies think milk are racist. They think that discussing this issue ever is racist. They think that saying that, the Windrush was not the British equivalent of the Mayflower that showed up after 1945 and actually settled the blitz-ridden wilderness of Britain, and that we had no culture here before, is itself racist. So excuse me and Rupert and yourself and everyone else if we don't take what they think is racist is gospel. As far as the stats that Emily Maitlis was citing to call Rupert Lowe a racist, I have a piece out tomorrow in The Critic going over a lot of this, but she referenced a report in the Times from Operation Hydrant, which collated the data on child sexual abuse and exploitation offences by ethnicity from all 43 police forces in England and Wales, and it shows that 23% of group-based exploitation cases were committed by Asian male offenders. 7% of those were Pakistani, even though Pakistani males are only 2.7% of the population according to the 2021 census. So that means that by her own statistics, Pakistani men are overrepresented by a factor of 2. But if she doesn't like those statistics that, she herself cited to call Rupert Lowe a racist, we can go to some ones where, rather than nationally, we look regionally, where there is a large concentration of Pakistani males. And we can look at West Yorkshire. Now, this is data that I got given by a Freedom of Information request for 2009 to 2024, when the new sexual exploitation guidelines were released, and they gave it by the victim and the perpetrator's ethnicity. And Asian suspects, and what they mean by this is, of course, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, because it's not like Japanese businessmen or Sikhs doing this, right? Asian suspects were between 23 and 43% of child sexual abuse offense suspects. That's a rate 2 to 4 times their share of the population, both locally, of course, and nationally. And white victims were the largest group. Pakistani victims, Asian Pakistani victims, are only 2%. So this shows that despite being the largest group per capita of perpetrators, they were the smallest group of victims, which means these crimes are happening between ethnic groups rather than within households, as Emily Maitlis was insinuating to call Rupert Lowe racist. These stats have been out there recently. Stats from 2013 show that Asian males were the largest group of offenders for type 1 group-based child sexual exploitation. And then, of course, there was the Quilliam report in 2017 that found that 84% of these offenders were Asian. And even Dr. Ella Cockbain, right, who is the go-to academic by The Guardian to refute the grooming gangs narrative, found in her own work, in her own sample, that 80% of the offenders of child sexual abuse were ethnically Pakistani. And she said herself, well, I don't want to provide a conclusion on this, and I'm shocked by the data. Turns out that actually the perpetrators themselves are very vocal about the racial, religious, and ethnic motivations for their crimes. And Emily Maitlis, to deny this, to obfuscate this, to say, well, all grooming's bad, just like Jeremy Corbyn says when he's asked, why do you support Hezbollah? Well, all terrorism bad. It is inexcusable in the face of abundant evidence.
Fascinating statistics, Connor. Can we look at the next confrontation from the interview? And this actually was my favorite part, because finally someone just had the balls to say to Maitlis's face, you're just a London liberal lovey.
Because I mean it. And at the end of the day, if you don't think the British people agree with me, then you're wrong, because they do. They've had enough of it. You don't have illegal migrants living next to you, Emily, because you live in a part of the country that probably doesn't have them.
And if you did, you would want them to starve to death.
So you are part of this liberal elite who basically says, do as I say, not as I do. Okay, so I'm sorry, what I meant was, and I mean it, is if our legal system doesn't allow us to detain and deport, we should set up a tented camp on an island. We should not treat them unfairly, but we should equally not put them at the top of waiting lists for dental treatment, for medical treatment. We should not give them spending money. We should not effectively treat them as if they have been taxpayers for years. They haven't been. They are illegal migrants. And by the way, they're not asylum seekers. They're economic migrants, most of them. So I mean, I know the virtue signalling do-gooders want to sort of feel good about themselves. But if you really want to, go and live next to these people. Go and spend your life, and you have them ogling at your children in school and things.
And of course, she doesn't want that, Connor.
No, of course not. And that's not something that she has to confront. Like many metropolitan liberals who live in a leafy London suburb, completely insulated by their own luxury beliefs from the consequences of those visited upon the working classes who can't escape these neighbourhoods when they've had rapid demographic and cultural change and the deleterious criminal effects of that visited upon them. If I might say, Dan, and I might touch a bit of a third rail here, but I don't think it's just that Emily Maitlis is delusionally liberal and has an abundance of compassion. I think her compassion is very, very selective. And I've written about this in my piece on this essay. Both her and her co-host, John Sopel, are British Jews. And so after October the 7th, they were quite rightly appalled not just by the acts of barbarity that were committed by Hamas on that day, but by the denial in the streets by pro-Hamas marchers who registered with the Met Police to conduct their hate march before the bodies had even gone cold, before the massacre had even stopped, right? And they said that these scenes were appalling, and they were afraid, as British Jews, for their future in the country if so many people were denying these atrocities to their face. If someone had sat down opposite Emily Maitlis and said, well, you know, There were only 6 million Jews that died in the Holocaust, but there were 20 million people that died on the Western Front. So why are you only talking about Jews? Don't you think all death is bad? Why are you focusing on it so much? She would quite rightly call that person an anti-Semite. She would quite rightly say, I think that you do not have my best interests at heart. I think you don't like me, and I don't think you like me as a group because I'm Jewish. I think you're dismissing atrocities that have been committed against me, for my race, and for my perceived religion. I don't know if she's practicing. And if I presume she has, like many journalists, been privy to the horrific footage that Hamas themselves recorded from that day. We're broadcasting it, we're filming it, we're phoning family members and boasting about it. Okay, if that's the standard, right? The perpetrators were unapologetic. There is abundant documentation of these crimes, and that if you deny it, you should not be provided a platform by something as wealthy as the news agents, Global, and presumably LBC and the BBC, where all the hosts formerly had their careers, then why did the victims of October 7th, who quite rightly deserve sympathy, get Emily Maitlis' sympathy, but not thousands of girls who have been raped, tortured, in some cases murdered, just like the girls in Reim at the Nova Festival? Why do they not get the same amount of sympathy? Why does Emily Maitlis just obfuscate in the great cloud of child sexual offences this specific crime where, just like Hamas, the Pakistani rapists are unapologetic about abusing these girls because they are kafir and because they are white and because they think the Pakistanis are the supreme race? And as one transcript that was read out by Katie Lamb recently have said, we're here to F white girls and F the government. There is a specifically racial, religious, and political motivation to these crimes, just as there was in October the 7th committed by Hamas. So why does Emily Maitlis care about those girls in Israel, but not these girls in England? I think it's a disgusting double standard, and I think it should be called out.
Indeed. And look, Rupert Lowe's doubled down, actually, this afternoon. I love it. His post on X, Emily Maitlis can call me racist for highlighting the Pakistani rape gangs. Let me be clear, I do not care. That vile attitude enables the decades-long mass rape of working-class white girls by Pakistani men. Justice must finally be delivered. Now, in another section of the interview, she actually accused Rupert Lowe of profiting from the rape gangs. And the Rape Gang Inquiry has now officially responded to that, saying, yesterday Emily Maitlis accused Rupert Lowe of making money from this inquiry. That is entirely untrue. In fact, Rupert has made a substantial donation out of his own pocket and will not receive a penny from the inquiry. Maitlis should apologise for her false remarks. At this point, she hasn't. I don't expect that she will. She feels totally protected by the mainstream media. And Rupert Lowe has also been backed by the brilliant Sammy Woodhouse on this, who is a victim of the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs, also now an advisor to his official inquiry. But she's not someone who does what anyone tells her to do, trust me. And Sammy has posted, this is the same bullshit. This is responding directly to Emily Maitlis. This is the same bullshit we've all been called and have heard for decades whenever we speak out about how children in the UK have been groomed, abused, raped, tortured, trafficked, criminalised, impregnated, and murdered. It's boring. Try something new. We're not racist for talking about rape gangs, and we're not going to stop just because of shit journalists like Emily Maitlis. Keep up the good work, Rupert. And I loved that. But Connor, Emily Maitlis wasn't the only mainstream media figure proving to be totally out of touch this week. Let's have a look at Susanna Reid on Good Morning Britain. But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact-checkers, as we're always talking about, because they claim to determine which facts are true. For good reason, we're losing trust. Think about the ongoing debates over free speech or Brexit or Trump or trans issues. But the good news is I've found a solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and manipulative narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. It has been a game changer for a news junkie like me, and you can see for yourself at ground.news/outspoken. I'm going to tell you about an incredible discount opportunity today in just one moment, but first let me show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's use my favorite story of the year. The Supreme Court ruled that women can only be biological adult human females, reversing years of trans extremism. In one place, Ground News puts the 350 sources covering the story. Then they instantly show how the story is being covered by the media, broken down by whether it leans to the left or the right. This is called the bias distribution chart. If you scroll down, you can see every headline about the story, along with the political bias and ownership of the publication. So we can see for ourselves quite clearly that on the right, the Daily Wire covered the case very accurately with the headline, UK Supreme Court rules trans-identifying men are not women. Spiked Online was even more forthright, declaring women exist, get over it. And the Daily Telegraph looked in depth at the disgraced famous faces who declared trans women are women. David Tennant, I'm looking at you. By stark contrast, the left-wing National said the result was only a victory for gender-critical feminists. And the Canary ran with this hilarious headline, victory for the far right, as Supreme Court rolls back trans women's rights by 2 decades. So yep, JK Rowling, she's far right now. Yeah, right, I say. My favourite feature, though, the blind spot feed. This services upwards of 20 stories daily that receive the majority of coverage from one side of the political spectrum. So if you love the news like I do, the blind spot feed is the best way to get a balanced perspective on what's happening. Go to ground.news/outspoken or scan the QR code to subscribe today. Get 40% off the same Vantage plan I use for unlimited access. That's 40% off right now at ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show.
As a stranger on your island?
Well, I live in the most diverse city in the UK, London.
We're in it now.
And I don't feel like a stranger.
No.
I feel like I'm in a really rich,
vibrant,
multicultural society.
In London, I live in...
But am I out of touch with people who this phrase is going to chime with? Because I don't really understand.
And okay, Connor, yep, she's totally out of touch. Couple of things. Firstly, just a few months ago, she was complaining about being mugged in London. It's also revealed that she lives in Belém, which is one of the least diverse parts of London. So yes, Susanna, you are completely out of touch, right?
Yeah, if she wasn't just playing hatchling and using rhetorical devices to answer her antiquated and thoroughly refuted by reality multicultural argument. You know, it might be useful, Susanna, to pop your SW1 bubble for a while and invite someone on the show who might explain to you the mindset of the majority of the country, who have even told the BBC, a margin, I think, of 92%, that multiculturalism has failed. The majority of the country now that is swinging towards parties, all of the big three now, who are making immigration restriction, not just illegal, but legal migration restriction, the main pitch to the electorate, and the 90% of constituencies registered before the last general election who thought, you know what, let's get immigration down. And they underestimated the level of net migration by a factor of 10. They thought it was 70,000, not 700,000, and still wanted immigration reduced and or stopped. So yes, she's completely out of touch, but this sort of feigned outrage and confusion shows that she's not interested in getting back in touch. As far as what Sammy Woodhouse has said, I echo that. Well done to her. Emily Maitlis is engaging in the continued cover-up that has been conducted for decades, and it shows why the BBC weren't bothered about covering this story 3 girls aside for many years. And it's, as was repeated in the Telford inquiry, the Alexis J report, the Louise Casey report, sensitivities around community cohesion or offending the Asian community or inflaming race relations were the reason why the lid was kept on this boiling pot. What Emily Maitlis has just tried to do there is silence Rupert Lowe, render the issue radioactive, rubbish his position, and tell her audience, who are presumably the metropolitan liberal types that hobnob with Susanna Reid and Maitlis herself, you cannot talk about this issue. And those people are more proximate to power, more proximate to the politicians and the lawyers and the policymakers who would be able to do something about this than the left-behind people in northern mill towns who are not even engaging with a podcast as odious as the newsagents, let alone capable of writing to their local MP and leveraging pressure for a national inquiry. So Emily Maitlis is trying to gatekeep against justice for these girls. It's reprehensible. It's been going on far too long. And everyone who turns around and just says, I don't care if you call me racist, I care about truth and justice, is on the right side of this.
Totally. Do you think the migrant bubble is being burst a little bit in the mainstream media, though, Connor? Because we also had this extraordinary call on LBC this week that went viral. Watch this.
For like 3 months, and then I quit. I went to look for a job elsewhere. I worked in construction first. It didn't work for me. I worked for Amazon as well. It didn't work for me. And then I found a job in the bank, and I'm living my life effectively.
And how many people in the care home that you worked in were in a similar situation to you?
So I have, first of all, I have 4 of my 2 sisters and 2 brothers. So we are 5 effectively coming from the same family in Zimbabwe.
Oh, really?
And we have all moved. My sister has moved into, she just recently got a job as well with one of the councils, which I'm not going to mention. Mm-hmm. And my brother has gone into, my other brother has gone into the construction industry where he's working.
And do you mind me asking how you afforded it? How did you afford to do it? Because the wages obviously are pretty notoriously bad in the care sector. So how did you fund your way through it?
It was very easy. So I had my cousin who was here, and she's the one who helped us to set up a company. She set up a company to bring us out of Zimbabwe, and that's how we managed to come here. So actually her care company is not working. It's not there as I'm speaking right now. It doesn't exist. So she just helped us to
so
come
hang
into
on, Jamie. Whoa. So your family member set up a company that acted as a provider of carers, through which they recruited you from abroad.
Yes.
And you went into a care home for precisely 3.5 minutes or whatever, and then looked for other work. So you manipulated the system for yourself, or you feel like you used the system to its best effects for you?
Absolutely.
Very easy, Connor. Very easy. That was his words.
You have to laugh or you cry because you're knowing you're paying for all of it, Dan. I mean, I don't think this is a popping of the metropolitan multicultural consensus bubble on this. I think it's just that the Boris wave has led to such a high volume of demographic and cultural change by people who have felt no pressure to assimilate to either British culture or have not had to abide by market incentive mechanisms to actually contribute, and therefore are shamelessly just pilfering taxpayer coffers, that when you just talk to one of these people, they, in their third world corruption mindset, just tell you exactly what they think. It's completely honest. And so if you ask most of the African care workers that have been brought over that are outnumbered by their dependents, they'll tell you the exact same story. And perhaps people will accuse me of gross overgeneralizations on this. They figured out earlier this year, and it was published in the Telegraph, and Mike Jones has written about it very well for The Critic, as have I before. They calculated the number of health and social care visas which have failed to fill demand, by the way. I think 70,000 health and social care visas in 2022 only led to 11,000 vacancies being filled. So just like that guy, they just hopped from job to job to job. But they figured out that they handed out something like 299,000 health and social care visas between 2021 and 2024. And they were outnumbered by almost 400,000 dependents. For people from Zimbabwe, like that caller there, they were outnumbered by their dependents. For every one care worker, there were 10 dependents. And every single one of those people, the dependents and the care worker, remember, who is paid for by the taxpayer, are net taxpayer drains. They will never, across their lifetime, be a net contributor. So why are we battery farming tax dependents from the third world as a matter of government policy? What's happened now with the Labour government, and again, I've broken down all of the nasty details hidden in the immigration white paper. What they've done is they have extended the 5-year period for indefinite leave to remain to 10 years, which means that after the next election, all of these people can have their visas rescinded and sent home. And the reason they need to do that is because if they don't, the ones that are already here, like this chap, the Zimbabwean care worker for 3 minutes, he and the rest of them will cost the taxpayer £264 billion across their lifetime. Utterly untenable, and we are being taken for fools by people from the third world who know exactly what they're doing.
Oh, yes, they do. Oh, yes, they do. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.